Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Coach and Benway podcast. As a general reminder, please share this wonderful experience you're about to have. I'm your co-host, Dr. Benway. My other co-host, the co-host, Coach Red Pill, is around. Coach, I think you have something to say about a certain kind of group's art.
Yeah, wanted to talk about SJW Art. What makes SJW Art? I'm really curious because, as we're recording this, the Han Solo movie came out and it fucking tanked at the box office. We're recording this on the Monday of Memorial Day weekend, and I'm betting that it doesn't cross the $100 million mark for the 4-day weekend. I think that it's just not going to make the 9 figures for the 4-day Memorial Day weekend. What do you say? Because so far it's gotten 83 million, and the foreign box office was catastrophic. And the thing is, it's funny as hell because everybody's criticizing the new Star Wars films as being total SJW shit. And I want to know, what is SJW art? What makes art SJW, and why does it fail? Why is it not delivering to people? So that's the source of the story, but of the topic of today. But anyway, do you think that Han Solo is going to make it to 100 million?
Over the weekend, I mean, it's possible, but if it does, it's going to be by the skin of its teeth, and it's already kind of too late. I feel like the executives are going to just look at whoever was in charge and say, you see what you fucked up and you did all that kind of thing. I would love for this to be the story that finally gets Kathleen Kennedy punished for taking charge of it. I don't know that will happen. I don't know that people will take the right lessons, because someone could always turn around and say, oh, well, we just made too many Star Wars movies. It's Star Wars fatigue. It's not SJW fatigue.
Yeah. My thinking is that they're going to blame it on Star Wars fatigue because they're going to say, well, we should have released it in December because this December they don't have any Star Wars movie coming out. The next Star Wars movie, as I understand it, is the Episode 9, which is going to be coming out in December of 2019. And so I think they're going to blame it all on Star Wars fatigue, that they shouldn't have released it so close, and they'll adjust their scheduling to make it every December. But it's not going to matter because it had nothing to do with Star Wars fatigue. You are not fatigued when you like movies, okay? When Transformers were at their peak, man, you could have released one a week and everybody would have been gobbling that shit up. Ditto with the Marvel superhero movies. I think they're just shitty movies.
Well, the funny thing is, Marvel actually did what Star Wars is saying is causing Star Wars fatigues, right? I mean, like, you had that, that Black Panther 6 months before Infinity Wars, and people gobbled both of them up. So that's clearly not the issue. I think, and I think the thing that everybody latches on to Star Wars is the topic that we're discussing today. It's specifically not just the fact that, we have some socially conscious ethos, but socially conscious ethos of SJWism in the face of some of your more traditional artwork. And I'm going to go on your traditional battleground or your whatever, the term, the field is for you, the Star Wars art that you enjoy. And I'm going to dig at you from inside your own fucking house. And that's the issue that people are pissed with.
Yeah, because the thing is, look, we talked about the whole episode about Star Wars. What's Star Wars? It's a soap opera. It's a space opera, soap opera set in space. That's it. It's not complicated. You should not have trouble doing good Star Wars movies. It's melodrama. It's episodic melodrama, a continuing arc. They fucked it up righteously, and the thing that's interesting to me is how they fucked it up. It's because of this SJW nonsense. Now, you're mentioning Kathleen Kennedy. For those of you who don't know, a lot of people who are watching the whole situation blame Kathleen Kennedy for injecting political ideology into the pictures. Political ideology, specifically feminism and social justice warrior sensibility, whereby, certain causes are sacrosanct, certain classes of people, races of people are untouchable, kind of thing. And that's the problem because, see, and this goes to the core of SJW art, because we see it in a lot of things, not just Star Wars. We see it in novels. Novels have ended as a serious art form in America. The novels that are being published, they're garbage. I mean, Benway, you're a big reader. You're a huge fucking reader. You gobble books like Tic Tacs, right? What was the last decent novel that you have read, contemporary novel? I mean, how many years ago was it published?
It wasn't even a novel. It was a collection of short stories. It was about 5-ish years ago, maybe a little less. And it was basically weird fiction. It was a collection of like weird fiction in contemporary America by a guy who literally works as like a busboy, if not a busboy, it's like a waiter in a chain restaurant. It's not the literate class of people.
So
That's
it
how.
was like indie shit that you read?
Yeah, it was kind of indie shit, which is really the only place I can go. And it was genre, which was ironically enough a quote unquote a safe space away from that shit. But the thing is, even that's now been infiltrated away. So frankly, even though I read a lot of books, I don't read much contemporary books now precisely for this issue, because I know what I'm going to consume is very annoying, SJW-ish and not even self-aware. Now, here's what's interesting bringing up literature compared to a film like Star Wars. Look, Star Wars, I sort of get where SJWism comes in very clearly because, hey, it's a big business. We want to be inclusive and, all that, bullshit in the corporate world, blah, 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 blah.
Diversity is our strength. Repeat.
Well, but here's the thing with a novel, right? There's only one person that needs to write it.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's a publishing apparatus behind it, and we can certainly talk about it. But I think the problem is right at the base of writing it, for say, because you have the freedom of one person, low financial risk, really, to produce it. It's just time and and pencils and paper, which is effectively zero as far as I'm concerned. So the fact that happened first and that infiltration was almost universal is interesting to me, because there should be, just by virtue of the volume of people who can write in the low cost entry, should be, we should have a little bit more, ironically enough, diverse thinking in literature, but we certainly don't. And I think there's a story behind that. I'd love to talk about that, because I think it tees up what we hinted at in Star Wars, because this is a long time coming.
Well, no, go. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you're leading up to. So
here's the thing, the decay of literature in this SJW format has happened for a long time, and it's an academic exercise or academic phenomenon. And you heard it in I don't even say this is the first time it was happening, but you really had it well documented in the mid and early 90s, maybe even the late 80s, by the two Blooms, Alan Bloom and Harold Bloom. Harold Bloom more particular. Harold Bloom is the great literary critic from Yale and Harvard, old Jewish guy who reads books like every 20 seconds kind of thing.
Yeah, he's read everything.
He says, look, I've been in the department long enough. And he's still alive and I think still teaching, God help him. And he says, look, I've been here long enough to know when I started, it was the departments were all headed by basically T.S. Eliot inspired guys, close reading of the text, very much literary focus, the structure of building works, and familiar with the history of literature. He saw the departments infiltrated by left-wing agitation, and he saw that the literature department in particular, and this is universal, they went from being people who were interested in teaching books to those who were interested in teaching the genealogy of political thought within books.
Right.
No longer were you learning how to write a book and why a certain book works technically, functionally, like how how a table works. You went to how is it, what kind of biases does this book have? What social tensions does the book represent? The author isn't interesting. It's the society which creates the book and consumes.
Well, you're basically, deconstructing it on a political basis, on an ideological level, on an ideological level that is the so-called cultural Marxist ideological lens, if you will, right? That's what they're basically doing.
Yeah, and it was, so there were guys like Paul Deman, and the influence of Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault were the real big culprits in this. Not necessarily those guys in and of themselves, but a lot of their students were coming in. And it's always the students who are worse than the teacher on this front.
Yeah, because
if you
they're
actually
true believers.
Read Derrida and Foucault, they actually know and read literature as the old guys would have read it. They had a different take on it. And from their perspective, it was just their take of what they wanted to do. The leftists latched onto their take and just transmuted into, this is the baseline of how we approach everything. And once you hit a certain tipping point in a department, I don't know if you're as familiar with how these things work. It's like once you get controlled on the tenure board and you have enough votes there, you control the department.
Yeah. That's basically it. Well, yeah, I mean, the long march through academia that you and I have talked about, that clearly has led to this. What's interesting to me, I came from publishing. Okay, I mean, I started out in LA working and, doing little scripts in Hollywood, and then I got into publishing. And the thing that I noticed was that this was in the 90s. that there was just a lot of emphasis on like be a clear genre. No bleeding between the genres. Okay, no gray areas between genres. And if you think about it, some of the great pieces of literature have been gray around the edges of the genre. I mean, all the great novelists. I mean, like look at Hemingway. He didn't write serious novels. He wrote war novels. But that sort of like bled towards like the serious side of things, right?
Yep.
Genre was not the key issue, is what I'm trying to say. But by the 90s and subsequently, it's genre and genre formula, even for so-called serious literature. There's like a certain formula that it started first with Perfect Day for Banana Fish, and that whole notion of like sort of like a mundane activity with sort of like hints that something serious was going on, and then perhaps some sort of epiphany at the end, sort of like a typical New Yorker story. But that became it. And, Raymond Carver, or let me phrase it, Gordon Lish's editing of Raymond Carver, because when you actually read what Raymond Carver actually wanted to publish and what he wound up publishing, because Gordon Lish just skinned away everything all the way down to the bone, they're two different writers. And I find Raymond Carver pathetic precisely because of that, because he was a weakling. He should have just told his editor to fuck off, and he should have just, anyway. That's for another conversation. But what I'm trying to make here is that kind of Carver-esque, Perfect Day for Banana Fish kind of writing. It's just there's nothing there. It's just like making gestures towards serious themes, but not even. But here's the thing that I'm interested in so far as SJW art, and why it fails so miserably in popcorn entertainment like Star Wars. Because interesting characters are fucked up. They have flaws, big ones. They have enormous flaws, some of them. So SJWs, they want to have like a black person or a woman or an Asian or some, designated minority be the main character. But they cannot allow the main character to have any kind of flaw. But that is precisely what makes the main character interesting. They are overcoming some flaw. If they don't have a flaw, then why am I watching this person? It's just like a fucking perfect robot.
Yeah, they have something to fix either internally or externally.
Right.
Yeah, your great hero stories, they're heroic, but even the heroes have something to overcome internally in order to become the hero. What's interesting in this, I was just thinking through it because you and I were saying, is there any kind of thing like a school of SJWism? And I said, there kind of was something very similar to it. They didn't call it that, but in like the socialist realist fiction of the Soviet Union and around that, let's say mid 20th century, early 20th century period, all stories, basically had to follow a certain kind of moral thrust, which was, the hero of socialist labor, organizing the social, the people together to
organizing the
resolve
little people.
some sort of issue. Exactly. The great heroes of the man on the tractor who is able to to plow the fields, or they love, to borrow shit from American literature, like The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It's like, no, we will remake, The Jungle, but with a success story and all of that shit. And, a lot of Soviet writers that we remember now are those who kind of, couldn't write that way. And they were, working around the edges, like Bulgakov with his like surrealist shit.
Yeah.
And whatnot. That was the kind of apparatus over there, which just feels very similar to here, which is we have social points that need to be made. The book is a vehicle for that. We've taught you that from your MFA program or your literary degree. You know exactly what we're supposed to do here. Provide a social work that we can use. You're not providing a human study. Humans, what are humans anyway, except, social constructs. So we're going to build a social construct that we want. I think that's it.
It's not so self-conscious like that. And there is no big, KGB agent showing up at the MFA class to tell students what's what and how they're going to write. No, I don't think it's quite like that. But what I would agree is that there is a
Michiko Kakutani shows up in the class and say, "You see that, children, you write book like this." For those who read the New York Times.
Okay, like take Jonathan Safran Foer. He's a guy who I think is a piece of shit, and he's just a typical SJW writer. Everybody's perfect. Everybody's a fucking angel. Everybody. Except there's like the designated bad guy, or there's like the designated eccentric. You know, his first book, the one where it's set where he goes to Russia, right? He runs into all these people who act without any kind of motivation. And this is interesting because it seems to me that when you understand somebody's motivation, when you make the actual effort to understand somebody else's motivation, you humanize them. If you deliberately try not to understand their motivation and just present what they do almost as if it's random, as if it's comically random, you're diminishing everybody. Your own subjectivity is elevated. And it's not that you have a clear view of reality. It's that you are better than they are because you are motivated, but they aren't. They're just like these random automatons that do like weird things, like wind up toys that randomly hop around and do crazy shit and you have no idea why. Because you're not trying to, you know, that's the vibe.
Yeah, well, then my question to that, I agree with you, and then my challenge to them is why write at that point? You know, if you were reducing the world.
No, but that's obvious. It's obvious because they're trying to feel themselves superior to others because in their real life they aren't. They're not winners. Look, no writer is a winner. There are very few writers who are actual winners at life. I can name two that stand out. Leo Tolstoy, who was a bona fide prince and, you know, war hero and, you know, generalized scoundrel, right? And Ernest Hemingway. Who else was like a winner? Who else could you like say to yourself, yeah, that guy would have been a success in fucking anything he'd done? Okay? I can think of those two men, and who else?
Pushkin,
okay,
version.
Fine. Yeah. Well, it tends to be like a Russian. The Russians, it tends to be dominated by Russians. Like Chekhov was an actual doctor and a successful doctor because the Russian literary tradition is if you are a successful man, you write because you are a successful man. I mean, it's losers don't write in Russia. It's the winners who write, which is kind of
well.
weird.
It's funny. I think in Russia there was no professional writer until the Soviet era.
Yeah, there wasn't. It was all amateur.
I think. Yeah.
It was all amateur. But okay. So no, but okay. Of the ones today, of like Jonathan Safran Foer, the guy's a loser. The guy's a fucking twink. Okay, he's a fucking little pathetic little shit who's afraid of eating animals. You know, he wrote a whole book about vegetarianism, and basically he essentially said that he's afraid that you know, eating an animal because of the loss of consciousness of the animal. Animals are food. They're prey.
Okay,
Come on.
so this to me is the thinking. This is the thinking of a man who never had a job. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And the reason I stress that is, and this is part of the reason why I think even Fran Lebowitz said that there's no great writers in their 20s because you have had to experience something in order to write intelligently. Exactly. And what's bad about this in particular is we just have a crop of professional writers. In other words, your profession is professionally not having human experiences.
Exactly.
I mean, like, even, you know, I mean, I don't know for certain. Tell me if I'm wrong. I felt like F. Scott Fitzgerald worked on the stock exchange, or at least was familiar with it.
Well, he might have been familiar with it, but I don't think that he had any kind of success at it. The only guy who worked in the stock market who had any kind of real success is Michael Lewis. I mean, he was a bond salesman, but he actually had success. He just got burned out by the whole thing and split. But the word I have is that, not from his word, but from what other people said, you know, contemporaries of his, that, yeah, he was doing all right at Salomon Brothers when he decided to split. He just OD'd on the whole thing and just left, you know.
Well, regardless, I mean, every great writer of the past had some experience that they're bringing to bear. Obviously, you mentioned Hemingway.
And also, sorry, about Michael Lewis, by the way, just FYI, as I understand it, he was actually making a decent living as a writer before he split. Okay, he wasn't a fucking idiot, okay? I mean, he was like publishing with The Economist and other magazines, and this was before he published Liar's Poker, okay? He was making a decent living. I mean, just a caveat to that. Okay, sorry. You were saying?
No, that's all part of the point, because, like, if you look at all of the great authors of the past, even if they weren't making great living, they had experience that they were bringing to bear on their literature. Yeah. You know, Hemingway was in the war. Mark Twain worked on the steamboat and a variety of careers. Yeah. Even you know, Leaves of Grass. Walt Whitman was a fucking nurse during the Civil War, attending to the falling soldiers.
Yeah.
All of them brought that experience to bear. There's no experience when you have an MFA.
No,
in fact, if anything, the only experience you have is what your teachers told you about the world.
Well, no, but the thing is, who succeeds in an MFA program? Who succeeds in any academic program? The person who conforms to the expectations of the professor. the unique mind, the unique imagination, it's going to suffer under such a structured environment because it will have to limit itself to the requirements of success of an academic program. Even if it's an MFA program, if it's supposed to be quote unquote designed to foment creativity, bullshit, it's not going to foment creativity because they're going to view creativity as the same thing that somebody else already did. Okay, that by definition is not creative. That's just repetitive. That's just copying. Okay, so all these MFA programs are a fucking waste of time.
It's part of this culture. It's this culture of accreditation. You know, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. Well, if I give you this little certificate, it means you can write. Fuck you. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Look, I only took one creative writing course in college. I mean, I earned a living as a writer for a long time, and I only once took a creative writing course because I needed an easy credit. It was a pass-fail, and I figured I can't fuck this up. There's no way I can fuck this up, right? And I almost did. Okay, because I wasn't writing what they expected. Okay, and it was just so pathetic because I wound up writing these poems about the death of my older brother, and how my older brother, you know, he was like the golden guy, and I was like the total family fuck up. And I wrote these poems, and I would read these poems and talk about them and talk about my feelings about these poems in the class, and I'm getting choked up now as I tell you because I never had an older brother. I just made him up, right? I made up the thing because that's what they wanted. They wanted some emotional cathartic bullshit, right? And I remember I wrote actually some pretty good fucking poems actually. Just totally made up and like pretended to be like, you know, the fuck up of the family and that my older brother was the golden boy, but then he got cancer and it was like awful and all this shit. And I would talk about the psychology of this shit in class, okay? And I got a citation at the end of it, you know, because I revealed myself. It was fucking therapy, okay? That's what they wanted. That's what they were giving the good grade for. And on top of that, of course, you know, the ultimate irony, I made it up. I thought I was actually fucking creative there. I mean, I made it like a fucking performance art if you think about it. But look, I wasn't thinking about it in terms of performance art. My thinking was, I want to pass this fucking thing. I was actually in danger of flunking the fucking course, even though I was delivering the shit because I wasn't doing what they wanted. And what they wanted was some sort of emotional cathartic experience, some bullshit like that. I don't. But this was fucking 93 when I did this shit. Oh.
Well, I mean, here's that thing that, yes, I mean, when you eat through literature, through art, whatever, there is going to be an emotional experience. I get that, but there is, you know, the part of the emotional experience is, you know, in some forms, is some thrust against some reality that you're exposed to. It doesn't have to be realism, but some sort of reality of how humans operate. And it's just clear to me when you really look at a lot of these outputs, right? It is therapeutic, but a therapeutic absence of a sense of how it would work out. You know, you and I had mentioned part of the problem I had with the most recent Star Wars is their whole notion of the Force now is, you know, you don't have to earn it. You just have to believe and want it enough, and you'll get it.
Yeah.
And that is the same kind of thinking of what you had said. It's like, let's have an emotionally cathartic self-therapy session.
Hang on, you know something? I'm realizing something that I'd actually never given it any thought. Okay, the story, by the way, is true. It was with a teacher called Cynthia Huntington. This was back in like 93, 94. And I really came close to flunking out of that fucking thing because she said that my work was not emotionally satisfying or emotionally revealing or some shit like that, right? And I made up this shit about the dead brother and started writing shit under that aegis, right? And I'm realizing now that what it is that she was trying to dig at something, some unique experience that I could have. And the fact of the matter is, as an undergraduate, as a child, you don't have any fucking experience in life except some tragedy that might have befallen you, such as the hypothetical death of an older brother. But see, what would have been much better if she had said, make up a tragedy that you have suffered and experiencing it from within, as opposed to report on something that has happened to you. I mean, the fact of the matter is, in that particular situation where I made up this older brother who died of leukemia, I went into all kinds of details. It was really cool, actually. It was like a whole, like a whole kind of thing that I invented, a family and the whole thing, and the whole family was totally different from my own real family, right? It was just an exercise for me, or let me rephrase that. I was just trying to get a good grade, but I realized that they don't trust imagination because. Now that I think about it, they were asking people, and they do ask people, to bring their lived experience to their work, quote unquote. That is, rehash some tragedy, like psychotherapy, okay? But see, it would be a much better experience if they asked the student, don't bring what has actually happened to you. Imagine something that might have happened to you, the death of an older brother or some tragedy or some whatever, and write it from that point of view. That's an exercise in imagination, right?
But
they don't
here's the
know.
thing: you have to deconstruct what they're saying to use their own shit against them. They're telling you, or they're implying that you should operate on lived experience. Talk about what this, that, and the other. Report on it, like almost like a transcript of emotional reality. But the thing is, they know that nobody has lived experience if you go through that system at that age. So they are in some sense forcing you to be imaginative on some regard, but they don't give you any tools to do so. And so what kind of comes about that is cliched notions about what emotional presence is, right? So they're already creating something that can't succeed on its own rules.
Yeah.
So that's why it feels light and broken and artificial, but not in like the stylistically, technically competent kind of way.
Yeah, it's not like Eugenie Ionescu that seems, grossly artificial in a very cool way. No, it's just flat. It's stupid. The characters are all fucking saints, and saints are fucking boring. That's the bottom line. The feeling I get from, or else they're like tough guys, like the hooker with a heart of gold. Okay. I mean, have you met hookers? I've met a few hookers in my time. I've met some really nasty pieces. They don't have a heart of gold. They're sons of bitches at heart. Okay.
Well, they do have a heart. They have a heart of gold. They bought it with the cash that was given to them from the hand jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's what's funny about that. When you said like everybody's perfect, maybe it's that. I always look at it this way: what do they take as a given that can't be changed? Yourself, the observing self. I am the constant rock upon which all of my observations have to change to conform to me. Oh, these guys don't understand me. Ooh, the system doesn't appreciate that it's uncomfortable for me to have to wake up at 6 a.m. to get to work. Oh, those fascists. That kind of thing. It's like my point of view can't be changed. And so maybe that comes across as, I'm perfect, or at least you think you're perfect, but I don't even think that they're even that self-aware.
No, they're not self-aware. The other thing, of course, is that they are like white writers, white Jewish writers, and they have to have like a black character. So they are terrified of, making the black character flawed in any way. Then you have shit like Black Panther, for instance, the movie, which is an absurd picture because it has all these black characters and they're all perfect. Every single one of them, even the bad guy is like perfect. It doesn't make any fucking sense because nobody's that fucking perfect. I mean, people have flaws. Even the best people have flaws. And a lot of times the best people are the best people because they have managed to either work around their flaws or use their flaws to their advantage or somehow else overcome their flaws. But this SJW attitude of perfection, of whitewashing everybody, it's just exhausting also because you can't get any kind of enjoyment and everything becomes tragic. Or let me phrase that. Everything becomes like that novel, the first novel that Jonathan Safran Foer wrote, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, about the Twin Towers, right? I actually lived about 3 blocks away from the Twin Towers, right? I missed it by exactly a month. I left the United States on August 11th, 2001. And I was living 3 blocks in diagonal from the World Trade Center. I lived in 85 Pearl Street, which is just, like I said, 3 blocks in diagonal. I knew 3 guys I knew them quite well because they walked their dogs at the Battery Park dog walk. And I knew 3 guys who were killed at the World Trade Center in 2000. Okay, and I knew a bunch of people there who suffered the effects because they were neighbors or people I knew or what have you. And most of the people I knew there who lived there were because of the dog park. Okay. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make, is that I read that book, or let me rephrase that. I tried to read that fucking thing, and I skimmed through it. The characters were all perfect. The father who is killed in the thing is perfect. The guys that I knew who were killed, they were all right. So one of them I was pretty close with. A couple of the others not so close with. I remember one of the guys. He was this gay guy from Israel. And he had this little yapping dog, and the yapping dog once, he adored that fucking dog. And the dog one day ran away or escaped or something and probably got snatched. And I never saw the guy again, though I heard that I later found out that he had been killed there because I knew that he worked there. And I remember him, going around and like he was freaking the fuck out. And yet at the same time, in the middle of him searching all over the place for his goddamn dog, he said to myself, well, it's kind of like a relief because then I don't have to deal with the dog anymore. Which is like a really revealing. That's why I'm not mentioning who the guy's name was. It was incredibly revealing of what a son of a bitch asshole he actually was, right?
Well, that's the kind of revealing details and observations that a great piece of literature would have.
Yeah.
In that, even if you don't call attention to it, it's like because the book doesn't have to say because he had this feelings, I knew he was a broken man. It's like no, the author is just clever enough to reveal that
Yeah.
detail
And
and
just
to know that the audience could pick it up.
Yeah, just toss it in, and you don't even have to emphasize it. It's like cooking. See, you're cooking, right, and you add a little basil to the stew or whatever, right? And some people will pick up on the basil, others will not. It'll depend on your tastes, your sensibilities, your whatever. Some people will find that it was dominated by basil, and others will say there was basil in that shit. It's that's the thing with great art. You throw shit in it, and different people get different things out of it. That's the whole point of it. But
Let me
SJW
throw a
art,
twist at. Yeah.
what?
Let me throw a twist at you. A little bit
Yeah,
different, but I think it's related.
but to nail my point, SJW guys want you to perceive their art in only one way, and the one way they want you to perceive it is that they, the author or the creator, is smart and moral. That's what they want.
So, that certainly is part of it, but I even think even that is slender, and there's not much there because they don't have enough knowledge to make it happen. And this is the kind of curveball I was going to throw your way.
Yeah.
It's not really a curveball; it's just a different way of looking at it.
Sure.
Do you think the fact that they experience and even just awareness of the history and references of literature and history in general weakens their art? I'll give you an example of something that I was watching from a fellow University of Chicago alumnus, by the way, George Steiner. There was George Steiner, big polymath, wrote a lot about history of language, literature, what have you. He had a good point about looking back on, I think, The Sun Also Rises, I think. I forget which one of the Hemingway stories. And there's a passage where the characters are going through France and they go past Roncevaux, either the battlefield or the monastery of Roncevaux, and they reference like a cold air is coming through. And the thing is, in that story, one of the characters is going to betray the band of people at Roncevaux. The thing is, Roncevaux in and of itself was a historic battle against the Saracens in which one of the members of the European fighters was betrayed by their own kind. And it was meant to be a reference for the people who know their history to know something bad's going to happen internally in this group. You can't get that experience anywhere because nobody knows it. You'd have to have a footnote to explain it. And he says the whole point of the story is ruined. He says Hemingway was writing for a general audience that would have understood this.
Right.
The fact that we now have not only writers who don't have that experience, but encourage you not to have that experience because that history is bad, because it's about white people being bad white people. Where's the shared references? Where are the apparatuses to understand in a subtle kind of way? Like you said, the basil, there's a little bit you could tell, and you have that kind of a palate that can appreciate that. Where is it?
Okay, well, you're talking two different things. First of all, the basil metaphor that I'm saying is that, see, for instance, in that little thing I mentioned about this actual guy who was sort of relieved that he had lost his fucking dog, even though he loved the fucking dog, or claimed at any rate that he loved the fucking dog, right? That I meant in the sense of like some people would take it, would notice it, and would from that extrapolate as to what kind of a man he actually was, and others would miss it altogether. Okay, that was but insofar as a shared experience, I disagree. I think that a lot of the more quote unquote serious literature, like the postmodern shit, it's dependent on having like a lot of information about some other shit, like Infinite Jest, House of Leaves, those kinds of big baggy monsters, to use Henry James's phrase. They depend on like knowing a whole shitload of shit about other stuff. It all goes back to Gravity's Rainbow and ultimately Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake, well, also, and the Cantos, and before that, The Wasteland. Okay, so let's start with The Wasteland and Ulysses, right? That you have to know a lot of shit, right? You have to be an academic. I think it's just how could I put this?
See, no, I kind of disagree a little bit because I don't consider even Infinite Jest and House of Leaves. I just don't even consider SJW-ish writing. I do consider them academic writing for sure, but they are fundamentally based around the footnote apparatuses to help explain it. In other words, look at my text that I produce.
I would agree with you that it's not SJW. Let's refine what SJW is then. What is SJW art? How can you define it? And my first approach would be that it is a literature that tries to reflect a multicultural environment, and because of it, it tends to narrow its characters and make them artificially virtuous so as not to offend the minorities that it seeks to portray.
I would extend it a little bit further. I think there's that as a baseline, but I think the thrust of the work is that it has a social good. This work is to stress the importance of a certain type of person, a certain type of thinking, and a certain type of social ordering forward. And it says you have to.
So it's socialist realism, basically.
Or the latest version of it. It's like, this type of thinking, this type of multicultural world is the best and it's valid. This type of ethical standing is the only way to go. Everything else, even to just hint of the humanity of it, is suspect. And you are a missionary.
Because it's actually, it's not that the hint of the humanity is the flaws of the characters, okay? But to them, that's not humanity, that's flaws that are insurmountable. Because, okay, the point I'm trying to make here, it seems to me that SJW art, in a very real sense, believes that you cannot supersede your flaws. That whatever trauma or flaw you have, you will never put it behind you. You will never overcome it. You will never make peace with it and deal with it and overcome it and become better despite it. Does this make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I could also turn it around another way. You could say, like, the forces of, to get even very specific, white male status quo is a rock. It's a rock that that can be overturned, but it's not a rock that can be changed. It won't.
Okay, but if you think about it, SJW art is incredibly immature because it doesn't believe that people can change.
Do you think people can change?
Oh, most certainly.
How so? I'm not being a dick about it. I'm just trying to get a sense of
what I mean by change, from. Right?
Yeah.
My thinking is that people can change for good or ill. Okay, they can change for the better or for the worse, but people evolve over time. And the man you were when you were 20 is not the man you're going to be at 40. And you're going to have different strengths and different weaknesses. And the strengths that you once had are perhaps gone, and the weaknesses that you once had are perhaps gone as well, and they've been replaced by other strengths, other weaknesses. I'm not. You see what I'm saying? I mean,
I do. I agree with that. I agree with that, and I would also add another thing that SJWs don't understand is that people are complicated.
Oh yeah, contradictory, and they're contradictory. Exactly. Yeah.
And even in like even if you posit a character and you accept that 20 years from now he's going to be the same guy, just for the sake of argument, you posit it. Even that thing which he is has like 17,000 layers to it, half of which contradict the other part. And he could simultaneously, let's just make an extreme case. It could be a guy who can wake up in the morning, attend to his family, make sure that his son and daughter are doing the right thing morally, and then in the afternoon go and like order the deaths of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
That kind of thing happens. Everybody kind of has elements of that. And I don't think the SJWs see that, or even if they do see that, they would say those nuances are immaterial compared to the main social issue we are dealing with.
Yeah, it's sort of like, an unwillingness to believe that Adolf Eichmann could have told a funny joke.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or that, use the other cliche, Hitler cared for his dog and his wife and all of that kind of shit.
It's not even that cared for his dog and his wife. It's the inability to conceive that somebody who is evil, for instance, can have good qualities and trivially good, but that expand him, that don't make him so narrow. Yeah, because we're basically saying that. Look, the thing is, that bothers me is that the good characters don't have any fucking flaws. Okay, I just and they master everything effortlessly. That's the other thing that drives me nuts, because there's no fucking cost to the things that they desire. They just get them. This is immature art. That's
Well,
the thing that drives me nuts. Because that was the difference between, you know, the first Star Wars movie of the new group, the Force Awakens, right, with the Mary Sue, who learned to fly the Millennium Falcon and defeat, you know, via a lightsaber battle, the baddest ass motherfucker around at that time, and do all these amazing things, you know, in half a movie, whereas Luke Skywalker didn't even do it in 3. I mean, what the fuck? It bothers me.
Well, let's underline why it bothers you, and it's something which it bothers me to a certain extent, but it also gives me confidence, because what is underlying that? They don't have confidence, because they need to reduce it all to the simplest terms. This person automatically perfect, this person automatically bad, but also filled with weaknesses. Mm-hmm. That's the only way they can construct the situation into such a way that they have confidence of the outcome. Because if they start going into the complicated nuances of the human reality, they begin to question they would be forced to either question their underlying ethos, or realize that someone else would say, hey, wait a minute, I don't fundamentally see this exactly the way you do. Yeah. The fact that there could be 30 different people with 30 different views on the situation is scary to them. Yeah, because it means that their view is not really the strongest.
Yeah. I know that's something that for all their bullshit talk about multiculturalism and diversity and shit, they don't really want it. They just want the appearance of it. It just drives me a little bit nuts. No, it drives me a lot nuts because it's dominating all the art forms. All of the art forms are going this direction. You cannot, in mainstream publishing today, you know, the big 5 right now, the big 5 publishing houses, you cannot get a serious novel published. There's only genre. Even literary novels are a genre of publishing. And the kinds of books that get published are just so much bullshit. There was this novel that was published a few years ago. They paid a boatload of fucking money for the fucking thing. It was called City on Fire. Some guy wrote this novel about the blackout in New York in 1977. I was actually alive at the time. This kid wasn't, okay? He got paid like $4 million for the fucking novel. There was a fucking bidding war, a frenzy over this fucking novel. It was an 800-page doorstopper or some shit like that. You knew just from the metrics of the thing that it's going to be a fucking flop. An 800-pound novel about the fucking New York blackout, you know, like a multicultural, multi-ethnic kind of like, you know, it's going to be a fucking mess. And, you know, it was. The thing just tanked, you know. I mean, they lost so much fucking money on that goddamn book. You know, the whole advance of it was just money that they could have just gone and made a bonfire, and it would have been more useful than what they got out of the fucking situation, right?
But what in this world compelled them to say we need to spend money on this? Someone made the calculus, right? I want to know what. I mean, I'm kind of curious as to what that calculus might have been.
Well, no, they didn't make the fucking calculus, okay, because it's a book that appealed to them. And I'm kind of curious as to why it appealed to them. What was it that made them think this is a good idea? Because anyway, I look at it, and it's a lousy idea. You know, it's just a terrible idea. Mm?
Well, that's what was strange to me, because the other topic.
Did you ever hear about this book?
No.
Okay, it was a big thing in publishing. It was a big deal in publishing. They spent a lot of fucking money on it. There was a fucking bidding war over this fucking thing. The editor-in-chief of Knopf wound up being the editor of the thing, and he was like gleeful about it. He was going to be his big thing, and it just crashed and burned. It was like 100 miles an hour straight into a fucking wall. You know, it just went splat all over the fucking place. City on Fire. I'll look it up while we're talking.
Well, what's strange about that is because there's a trend that I've seen in publishing, which I feel like goes hand in hand with this SJW simplistic mentality, and that kind of doesn't fit with it. Is this whole, you know, everything is a young adult novel, if you really think about it. You know what I mean? Everything is intentionally meant, and this is how I read what young adult means. It's intentionally meant to be not complicated or not too complicated. Mm-hmm. You know, all of these hot books, even if they're not, set aside whether they're SJW or not, I think there's elements of it in them, but regardless, it's all the idea that like, oh, in order to get a mass audience, we need to make sure that nothing really is exerting people too much. And to me, you know, if you're going to have books like that, you know, be the Harry Potter novels, sorry kids, it's not that complicated, and it's basically just a mixture of a campus novel and Jesus, or you know, the Twilight series, or you know, the Hunger Games, or all of these other things that are eventually going to get turned into movies. The fundamental idea is like, oh, you know, it's light reading, you can finish it in a sitting. Oh, you're not too complicated. SJWism is perfect for that because it's not complicated characters, it's not complicated humans. It's got a simple message you can work with. So the idea, that's why your story was a little bit interesting to me, is because I'm like, wow, that even at 800 pages, like, who's going to spend the time? The mentality is simple.
Yeah, hang on a second. Just FYI, City on Fire by Garth Risk Hallberg, a debut novel. And that's always a red flag, because they've been overpaying for decades now for debut novels, because they always think that the next debut novel is the next big thing. Okay, so this came out in 2015. The novel takes place in New York City in the 1970s. Follows the investigation of a Central Park shooting that took place on New Year's Eve during the 1970s. Okay, I think it's about Son of Sam. I was wrong about the blackout. Anyway, 927 fucking pages. Who's got the time to read such a monster? Okay, it was sold for a $2 million advance, likely the most ever for a debut novel. I'd like to know if that was 2 million worldwide rights or just North American rights, because if it was just North American rights, this guy must have cleared another $1 million to $2 million on the worldwide rights. I mean, he must have made out like a fucking bandit. Good on him. But yeah.
Curious question: did he ever write again?
Well, this was 2015, so yeah. So we don't. He actually published a novel back in 2007. So it wasn't actually his debut novel; it was his second book. In 2007, he published A Field Guide to the North American Family, and then City on Fire.
Fuck.
A Field Guide to the North American Family. Yeah, that alone.
The title alone, I laughed at it,
Yeah. But look, I'm looking at his thing where he met his future wife. He graduated from Washington University in 2000 with degrees in English and African American Studies. Now, what the fuck do you think that tells you? Okay. Oh,
does it tell me that he had a little fucking African masks all over his house, and that it means he's going to be a woke bastard?
Yeah. He was woke as fuck. Well, he was. I mean, he got the money. It's the other guy who wasn't woke enough,
I just want to know if he just took the money and ran, because if I were him, I would say, especially like you said, if there's a couple more $1 million internationally, I would say $4 million, run away to the to Nassau and live the rest of your days.
And like I said, it was published by Knopf. I mean, Jesus, it was published by Knopf. And it was edited by, where's this guy's name? I can't find it right now. But yeah, Sony Mehta. Sony Mehta did it, okay? Jesus Christ, man. Okay, he's like the CEO of the whole thing. He's the chairman of the Knopf Doubleday Publishing Group, which is one of the big five, right? Oh man, what a fucking balls up.
So here's the interesting question, and I'm asking you because I know you're literally working on this. Where does a healthy gentleman of literary taste go for serious work these days? Where can he go?
Oh, the past. Sure. I mean, I don't bother with current novels. I bother with current nonfiction, which is really well written. I mean, I'm talking about the informative nonfiction. It's beautifully written, right? So of course, like I'm about to crack open a book called Dictatorland, which is about African dictatorships. Because Africa is really the continent we have to be paying attention to. I mean, just the population alone, the population explosion, we're going to have all kinds of problems, okay? Because also those fucking monkey people, because that's the only name you can call them, they are setting themselves up for a catastrophic famine, okay? They have too many goddamn people, and they keep fucking up the governments that can provide for the food for all these fucking people, okay? Like, look at South Africa. What's happening? They're expropriating the white farmers, and they're giving it to people who don't have any kind of training. And so what happens to the land? Well, what happened in fucking Zimbabwe? Zimbabwe, back when it was Rhodesia, was a breadbasket of Africa. And then the people started eating one another because there was no fucking food because of mismanagement. But anyway, I'm reading about that.
It sounds like someone is starting to listen to me when I said you got to stop providing subsistence to this people, and you're creating your own problem. But I agree. Yeah, I think that's right. I do the same thing too now. Contemporary. I read a lot more nonfiction. I mean, I always read a lot. But
I remember the exact moment when I realized it was a waste of time to be reading contemporary novels. I can tell you the exact book that I read. It was The Hours. That book by Michael Cunningham, the 3-track novel where it's about what's her name, Virginia Woolf writing Mrs. Dalloway.
Yep.
Then the Mrs. Dalloway in the 1950s, and the the writer who's dying of AIDS in the contemporary setting. I think it was set in the 1980s. I could be wrong, but it was sort of like contemporary of the three tracks, right?
Right.
And I read that book and I thought it was a colossal piece of shit. I mean, it was just a colossal. I thought it was pretentious, and it won the Pulitzer Prize. It was supposed to be like the big thing, and I thought it was incredibly pretentious, precious. I thought that the characters were absurd, all of them. Even the ones who were supposed to be real, And I thought it was just a colossal piece of shit. And it came out in '98, and I read that book like in 2000, and I thought, this is the state of the art form. So we're fucked. So
Well, here's what's funny about that. Like, I agreed with you. I had a visceral negative reaction to the characters on a moral level, in addition to everything else. But then I thought to myself, okay, this is clearly a pastiche of Mrs. Dalloway, and I thought to myself, what are you getting out of this book that you didn't already get if you read it closely, the original Mrs. Dalloway? Other
and
than
not,
to say,
not even closely. You don't even have read Mrs. Dalloway closely. You just casually and superficially. You could have gotten the fucking Cliff Notes and gotten more out of it than you got out of this fucking book.
well, but that's my point. What did they add? The only thing they added was, 50s woman. Oh, being a 50s woman was so fucking tough, man. You can appreciate the fact that she would leave her family. The 80s, we have to have a gay guy suffering from AIDS who kills himself. Oh, in other words, what did they add? The social, signpost that says, look, this novel means something. Give me a award over here. It's like, please spare me. I don't even like Virginia Woolf that much.
Here's
I think
the
this
thing
Dalloway's
that
a good book.
I don't understand. They keep arguing about not being stereotypical and shit like that, and yet all of the art that they do is so fucking stereotypical. Stereotypical in a banal and pathetic kind of way. You know what I'm saying? Okay, like the gay guy who's like embittered and angry, and dying of AIDS, and it's like, oh man, it's just exhausting because this shit is. It's just so unoriginal because the SJW art is just a pastiche of ingredients, but there's no art in mixing those ingredients. It's like a failure to cook the stew. See, because when you cook a stew, it's not just like tossing everything together. You have to make it so that they blend together, that they fit. It's cooking, it's art. It's the same fucking thing. You're bringing the ingredients. It's like, look. Okay, the thing about the gay guy dying of AIDS, yeah, okay, it's a stereotype. It could have been handled better. It could have been handled in such a way that it was unique. It wasn't. That was the thing.
Well, I'll tell you it was geared up to do this, and I was prepared for it to do that interesting thing, but it didn't, and I'll tell you why, and why I think it's related to what you're saying. The gay guy, it turns out, is the son of the 50s mother who abandoned her family.
Right.
And part of the narrative you're going to get going through here is everything that was terrible, all the pain that this guy was going through could easily be said. The mother abandoned this child because she was selfish, because she didn't care to have any sort of social obligations because the 50s life was stifling. You could have had a narrative that thrust this and dealt with the consequences of the mother's actions. It was ready to do this. And what happened? When they confront the mother, it's like, oh, we understand your situation. In other words, the two cliched ideas of left-wing thinking, poor homosexual man suffering from AIDS.
You're right.
And, I'm a 50s mother. We can't be angry at both of them. So, life sucks. You know what I mean?
Yes, you're right. Well, a failure to carry out a moral judgment. That's basically what it is. That's basically what it is.
And what's so weird about that to me, especially like I said in the world of SJWism, I would almost argue that it's simplistic judgment all the time, right? If anything, who gets the worst judgment in that book? It's the men. The husband of the woman from the 50s, like, he creates this stifling world.
He was a great guy.
Or Virginia Woolf's husband,
put up with her craziness. Yeah.
He says, she's like, how dare you put me in this thing where people will look after me? It's stifling and you're putting me as a prisoner. He says, I'm doing it so you don't fucking kill yourself.
Yeah. No, look, it's just I'm how can I put it? I hate this kind of shit. But the inside of the conversation that we're currently having that I realized that it's sort of like I had known this intellectually, but I hadn't really known this in my bones, as it were, is realizing that, this is all socialist realism. That's what we're talking about. But I'm trying to understand who are the kulaks and the capitalists and who are the great patriotic warriors. Is it basically, the little brown people and the gay people are the patriotic warriors, and the And everybody else, the whites and the straights and the men especially, they're the kulaks and the oligarchs and the evil who must be destroyed. Is that basically the simplistic answer to that?
So I'll answer it in a provocative way. The woke people, of which most are of color, and then some white people who know better.
Who are
Those
allies?
are your heroes. And I'm going to phrase it this way to precisely not do it the way they think of it, but in the reality, the villains, the kulaks, the capitalists are those people who are living their life normally. In other words, this is why I hate it so much, because it's in a way, and I'm going to say
No,
this.
I disagree. I disagree. You know what
It's
it
a
is?
death cult.
No,
This
you know
is
what
a
it
death
is?
cult.
You know, yeah, it is a death cult. But I think what it is the people who are willing to make moral judgments, they're the evil ones. Because, like, for instance, in the Hours, let's take a book that you and I have both read and despise in equal measure, and we remember enough about the plot and the characters to be able to have a discussion about it. The husband of the '50s woman, whatever her name was, right? I'm looking it up just now. Oh God, there were a lot of fucking characters in this fucking thing. Oh no. Sorry, I'm like looking at the Wikipedia sum up of the book. It's just endless. I mean, it went on and on and on. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. The husband in the 1950s, right? Who was this perfectly nice guy, right?
Dan Brown. The character's name is Dan Brown. I know because it's John C. Reilly. I'm looking up the movie, and I know John C. Reilly played the character, so that was my easy way in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He's a great actor, man. I love him. Anyway, he plays this character. He was like a sort of like a schlubby guy. I mean, I don't even remember him in the novel. I just remember him in the movie because of John C. Reilly. But
The guy's working all the time. That's why you don't know him.
yeah. But the thing is, see, you could imagine that he would not be morally down with her actions, with the actions of any of these characters. And that's the thing. It's the inability to. It's the fear of moral judgment. Anybody who has the ability to make a moral judgment becomes the enemy, because they are all acting in ways that they know fundamentally they should not be acting, in ways that are selfish, in ways that are cruel, in ways that are irresponsible and stupid. Yeah.
But here's the thing. I think you're right on here. But what's interesting about that is the incoherence of it internally, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's fundamentally, they're like, we don't like, people who make moral judgments are a problem because they're making generally moral judgments of them. They're willing to make moral judgments very quickly, right?
Oh, yeah.
But
But
it's just
of the people who are safely the enemy in capital letters.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
In a very
because
simplistic
you
kind
and
of way,
I are fucking Nazis. We're fucking baby eaters. I mean,
Well, I've only eaten a baby once.
I had, by the way, you only had a baby once? What the fuck is
I've
the matter
only
with you?
I've only eaten a baby once.
No, I eat one every day, for lunch. Yeah. I mean,
Is that how you make you keep your youthful good looks?
Yes, exactly. Jesus Christ. These fucking people, they think that everybody who disagrees with them, I mean, they really are losing their shit now, because it's becoming that everybody who disagrees with them, even marginally, is a fucking Nazi. It's becoming incomprehensible to me at this point. But going back to the thing is, the art that we are experiencing, that is SJW, it's because the people trained in this ideology in the better universities who were accredited, they went on to the next stage of their accreditation process in the corporate world. And since so much of the arts are concentrated in very few hands, because you were talking about that anybody can write a book, that all you need is a pen and paper and just put in the hours and you're set, right? Which is true. But and that's, of course, the dirty little secret about writing that people don't want to, because lots of times people have asked me, what's the secret to success as a writer? And it's just ass on the seat, X number of hours a day, X number of pages a day, and you'll get there eventually. They don't want to hear that. They always want some, like magic spell that will get them there. But anyway, about the people who are choosing the art, they
Right.
are all SJWs. And so the art forms that they are, the arts that they are choosing, the scripts that they are choosing, conform to their mentality. And what we're seeing, we saw this in the 90s with publishing, that it started to decay. And people started blaming Amazon for it, and that's fucking bullshit. Okay, yes, Amazon did have a part to play with the decay of publishing, but they don't want to face the facts that the number of books that people buy decreased. Okay, and I would venture to say that if you started looking at by title, by year of first publication, you'd start to realize that it was the contemporary novel scene. Just people just didn't care about it. Sure, there were blockbusters here and there. You know, I mean, like you'd have like the Harry Potter books, and by the way, the Harry Potter books, people don't realize that those books really covered publishing quite a bit because of the distortion of those books. You know, you didn't see how the other parts of the market in publishing were collapsing. And here's something else I would venture to say. The reason you had such huge blockbuster in the Harry Potter novels is not because they were so good. They were very good. I've read all 7 of them multiple times. I enjoy them tremendously. They're great entertainment. And that's what they are, entertainment. But the thing is, see, the lack of entertainment is what drove people to it. You see what I mean? It was
Yes.
sort of like the rest of the publishing was not doing its job. If the rest of the publishing industry had not been so SJW, Harry Potter would not have happened because there wouldn't have been room for it. Okay, and back in the 90s, this shit was happening. Okay, and it's gotten worse and worse, and now we're seeing it in film catastrophically. I mean, Lucasfilm is collapsing. I mean, if I were like a major shareholder in Disney, I'd want Kathleen Kennedy's head because she just doesn't seem to understand what the fuck the business of Disney Corporation is. Disney Corporation is there to sell fucking toys. That's its job. And the movies and the TV shows and all the rest of that shit, they're just basically advertisements for the toys. If you are not creating good advertising for the toys, then you are fucking up. She's fucking up righteously, you know, catastrophically. It's just a lot of fucking money is going down the tubes. Money that is not being earned, and now we're starting to get into actual losses with the Solo picture, which the Solo picture apparently is the most expensive Star Wars picture. They're estimating it that just the negative cost being just the film, okay, not prints and advertising, that the negative cost is like something like 250 million. You know, that is a huge fucking hit, and Disney needs at least 500 million to recoup that money. But if you add in P&A, prints and advertising, the all-in cost of that fucking picture was probably closer to 350 million. These fucking people need $700 million in box office, at least, to recoup that money. Just to recoup it. They're not going to fucking get it. The film is collapsing worldwide. I'd be fucking furious, but it's because
well, here's the
SJW.
interesting, and here's the interesting question. It's a big this is a big question, and I've racked my brain around it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is SJW isms. You know, when they hit, comic books, when they hit movies, when they hit actual literature, you take a financial hit as a result of it. In theory, logical minds, if you adapted the neoliberal economic world, which said we're rational thinkers here, we're losing money, we're going to correct course for this.
No,
the
don't.
Course correction should have happened earlier, a lot earlier, if people were fully rational.
No, because here's another problem. See, it's one of the great things about a liberal arts education, which you and I both got, is that the astonishing power of rationalizing away any fucking problem and pinning the blame on something that had fucking nothing to do with the failure of the project. I mean, shit, you and I both know that a lot of times consulting firms are hired specifically to come up with an explanation that isn't basically that the CEO was a fucking idiot who made a bad decision, right? I mean, sometimes that's the explicit message of consultants that are hired. The failure of Solo, they're going to explain it away as like, oh, it was too close to the last one. Oh, it was like Deadpool 2 and the other Avengers movie were doing better than expected. Oh, the weather. Oh, the fucking whatever the fuck, right? There was an outbreak of salmonella. It rained too much in the South. Who knows? They're going to explain it away instead of saying, this fucking approach to the fucking material is fucking things up and alienating the fan base. The fan base don't want to go and fucking see this fucking thing. And you see it on YouTube all the fucking time, And I know. There's this channel I follow, Geeks and Gamers, right? Now, this guy was like doing like, as the name implies, geeks and gaming shit. And he had like a couple thousand subscribers, right? And then he started hitting on Star Wars. And his views exploded, hitting on Star Wars and basically saying, Star Wars is a piece of shit and these people are fucking idiots. He started banging that drum. He's up to like 40,000 subscribers, or more. just in like the last couple of months, because he hit on what the people wanted to hear. What the people want to hear is that they're fucking pissed off at this fucking bullshit, right? That Disney is pulling. I'm sorry, I'm. It's a you and
No,
I
no,
are
no.
businessmen,
It's important.
and we are pissed at the bad business approach of these fucking.
Well, that's why it pisses me off because it speaks to an even bigger issue of concern, and maybe this is the highlight of everything.
Mhm.
Everything we were taught in economics said that there is a mechanism in place to correct such horrifically bad
Nope.
thinking, and it's not working.
Nope.
Right. And that's the issue, because we were told that this would work one way, shape, or form. Even if the companies didn't make the right decision, other companies will get in and eat their lunch. I see a little peripheral stuff, but not big enough to really move the needle.
No.
And that's why it's concerning to me, because the ideological absorption of a lot of these things are such that we can't even, or the people in charge.
There are two things that are happening simultaneously. On the one hand, the leadership classes have this mentality, this ideology that is very destructive for creative enterprises. And do keep in mind, the more expensive creative endeavors like movies, games, what have you, they're very expensive. And because they're very expensive, they need a lot of people to make happen. That's why they're so expensive. And because you need so many people, you need a managerial class that knows what the fuck it's doing insofar as managing large groups of people for a designated task. And these managers have been brainwashed with this bullshit, and they're applying it. I mean, this is the ultimate outgrowth of the long march through academia, right? On the one hand, and on the other hand, you have the monopolization of a lot of this stuff. I mean, shit. The major publishing houses, there are fucking 5. That's it. It's that you hear that there are so many different publishing houses. There's Knopf and Doubleday and this and that and Random House.
But those are imprints.
They're imprints. They're imprints. They're divisions within large companies. And a lot of times they're in complete coordination, okay? Because they're basically saying, okay, you handle this kind of book and I'll handle that kind of book. That kind of approach, okay? So don't be fooled. You go to the Barnes & Noble or wherever you're buying books and you see all those different imprints. It's only 5. 90% of the book business is 5 publishing houses. I'm talking, trade fiction, the kind of fiction that you go, the books of different kinds, right? Anyway.
And here's the thing, though. Even that isn't at the highest level of consolidation. You got to take it up one level. It's the media conglomeration.
Yeah.
If in terms of ownership of who owns it, there's 3 or 4 major holding companies that control all media.
Yeah, I mean, if I were Marvel, which is a part of Disney, by the way, Marvel and Lucasfilm compete, but they're part of the same conglomerate. Well, if I were the head of Disney, if I were Robert Iger, who's the head of Disney, I'd be kissing the feet of Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige is his name, the guy who runs Marvel.
Right.
He's just, thank the Lord for that son of a bitch, because he's at least one motherfucker who knows what the fuck he's doing. That Negro knows how to make movies, okay? And he's a white guy, by the way. I don't know why I called him that, other than the fact that I'm just like deliberately.
Well, because you want to show us how woke you are. I get it.
I'm so goddamn woke, man. I'm like, I'm blacker than Talcum X. What do you want me to say? Anyway.
Well, you probably are, but that's what's
probably
funny about
I am. Yeah, that's exactly right. But Kevin Feige, he knows what the fuck he's doing. All he cares about is making fucking blockbuster entertainment. And of course, we can criticize the ever-living shit out of his movies for being lacking in artistry and being so fucking pedestrian, because they are. But he gets the job done. I mean, in terms of as an executive, as a businessman, he is a businessman who knows how to handle a creative enterprise. You can no doubt argue about all kinds of issues that, the Marvel movies have crappy music, that they don't know how to use the camera, they don't know how to use their sets that are extraordinary sets, but just so poorly used. They don't know how to handle actors. I mean, they're poorly directed, blah, 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 blah. Yes, but they deliver popcorn entertainment that doesn't have a thought in its empty little head except to entertain people. If this were
it's succeeding on its own rules.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what you give them credit.
Yeah, if this were run by Kathleen Kennedy, shit, man, this shit, the whole Marvel thing would have tanked ages ago. Well, people like Kathleen Kennedy, SJWs, are running Marvel Comics, and Marvel Comics are tanking. There are lots of YouTube channels devoted to that. But it's okay. But we're still not closer to a definition, a simple definition of what it is that SJW art is, because we know it when we see it, but I don't want a Potter Stewart definition of SJW art. I want like an actual concrete, this is it. Oh, for those of you who don't know the reference, Potter Stewart was a Supreme Court nominee, or justice rather, who said that he couldn't define pornography, but he knew it when he saw it, which is just fucking vacuous as far as I'm concerned, but okay. How do you define SJW art? What is it?
Like I said, I still maintain that it's a very, it's just the latest version of socialist realism, and the content of that ideology that's ironically governing it is, like I said, the totems of the multicultural attitudes that we said before, and specifically there is, ironically enough, even though they hate judgment, they are just judging the status quo, white majority.
The thing that and with this, I think that we ought to call it a close insofar as the podcast. But the thing that I keep returning to is that this kind of attitude is only born by rich people, by rich, privileged people, by people who have never had any difficulty in life, who've never had to suffer, who've never had to wonder where they're going to get their next meal from. This is not the attitude, or is not an attitude that develops in a society that is struggling, that is dynamic. It's the mentality of the rich grandchildren of the billionaire. The rich grandchildren of the billionaire who are no longer billionaires, but, just healthy millionaires. And soon enough, the fortune of the family will be completely gone in a generation or two. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that troubles me.
Well, here's the thing. Only a rich person can make a fetish out of the pains of being marginalized and poor. All of those who are poor and those who are working class, their one guiding vision, especially if they're successful, is I don't want to be this way anymore.
Yeah.
So they move out of it. When you are not that, and you think about, I hate everything about me being successful, rich family, what have you, I fetishize that which isn't them, and then I think I can become great by virtue of that, or I become better. And the thing, nobody shares that other than someone who never lived it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because I think it's the art form of the decay of our empire. Yeah. Well, the good thing is that, when empires are self-consciously collapsing, when they realize that things are going down the tubes, then you get some interesting art. So let's hope that, the decay starts to happen in such a way that people realize it and start to create something worthwhile, because the current crop of shit that's coming out, it's just pointless and useless and stupid. I mean, I think that's the thing that bothers me the most. What?
What made me laugh about that is, like, your hope for the future is that our decay becomes, we become self-aware of the decay in order to better describe it, which is what a lovely positive. I just wish we could understand.
Man. We are in the decay. We are in the decay. This is we are on the way out. We are collapsing as a society. The Western democracies, shit, you can't even call them properly democracies anymore with what's going on with the imprisonment of Tommy Robinson and all that shit. The fact that they're going to try to kill him while in prison. That pretty much seems. I've been going on that horse for a while because it just really bothers me. But
I'm going to Wakanda. I'll see you later.
And on that note, we're going to call it a podcast. So on behalf of this is Coach Red Pill, and I'll have my co-host Dr. Benway sign us off.
What's a good way of signing off? Don't read.
Don't read. Don't read.
Take that with many grains of salt. It's not meant to be taken literally.
Yeah.
But even then, the idea of taking something literally, even then, is a skill we don't have anymore.
Well, the music outro is playing right now as we're speaking. So, okay. Take care. Talk to you soon, and enjoy the rest of your day.